Till that only 64 kids that have played in the Little League World Series since 1947 have made it to the majors. Something not yet mentioned is the wear and tear on kids' bodies. This is largely the reason why NBA players get hurt so often now, despite the advances in medicine, medical treatments and surgeries, and physical therapy. Kids are being pushed towards greatness younger and more intensely than ever before, and injuries sustained as kids can hurt their competitive chances and ability to play professional sports both immediately and for a significant period of time. Might also be why NFL players from smaller schools with limited college experience are starting to get drafted higher and higher. Only, another way to say it would be, about 1 in 240-300 players who played in the Little League World Series since 1947 make it to the majors. About 75 LLWS since 1947. About 30 players each year. Players are aged 10-12. About 65 LLWS to count can't factor in the last 10 years or so because the players would be too young to have had a chance to play in the majors. Edited to change original math. Okay, if they counted all the teams that made it to the LLWS, that would be around 1 in 240-300 players, still a good number. There is also the fact that a lot of kids don't play Little League. I played Pony League when I was young, basically normal baseball rules and field dimensions of what you watch in the MLB, cause that was what was offered. Also helped transition to travel ball later even though my skills didn't transition well. Lol. A quick Google shows 375 players have come from Pony. It's just not as prominent on TV, I guess. I worked with Jim Barbieri in the early 2000s while in high school at our local grocery store. Jim ran the fish department. He approached me one day and asked if I was related to John, who is my grandpa. Apparently he and my grandpa had worked years together at Reiner Beer. I asked my grandpa about him and he said, "Jim is a hell of a green thumb." It would be more interesting to me to learn what they had done with their lives. Involvement in a sport at this level while young can teach skills and habits that will pay off in many walks of life. Anyone who thinks these kids were less successful because they didn't make it to the majors suffer from a serious lack of imagination. I played in the 95 LLWS. Hit a grand slam, too. By the time I got to high school I was burned out on baseball. I moved to a city where football ruled everything, and I picked up a guitar and played in a band, instead. No regrets. I was good enough for LLWS but would never ever have been good enough to go pro. Maybe I'm crazy, but I never loved that this is on national TV. It just feels wrong to me. Not that there isn't a lot of feel good, love of the game vibes, there is. But not sure these kids need to have millions of people watching them and companies making lots of money from their games. Yeah, my son is totally going. His private hitting instructor said so long as I take him to 8 camps a year and buy this specialty bat and equipment that the instructor sells it was only $7,000. He says on the street it goes for $10K, then my little brat Ice will be in the pros someday. Kids with that talent get bored and peak early on. Or they just start smoking weed in high school or something. I had a buddy who skipped 2 grades in elementary school. By the time we all graduated, I'd say he was just a typical dumbass like the rest of us. My guy Jason Varitek representing the Little League World Series, College World Series, and Major League World Series trifecta. Tech was so damn good at everything except catching the knuckleball. Only captain the Red Sox have had since the 80s. Qualifying for the Little League WS is incredibly hard. It's not the best of the best, it is the best of the best of the best. You have to beat so many good teams just to get in. I'm talking best teams all over the country. Most of the best 12-14-year-olds play at a higher level of competition than Little League. Usually travel ball or AAU equivalent leagues and hoops. Cooperstown, New York has the best summer tournaments in terms of youth talent. My cousin spent his whole life playing in World Series. Babe Ruth World Series, high school state champs, college World Series, into the minors, broke his shoulder blade in half. That was the end of it. This is a crazy stat. Think of all the teams and divisions. All the best kids in the world in less than 1 a year becomes a ML Burr. Mind blown. Imagine AAU basketball and none of them become NBAers. Would be interesting to know stats for foreign players who made it to majors in their home country. South Korea and Japan have their own major leagues with good competition. I know 2 players that will be on this list of 64 that are brothers that I grew up with and they played in the Little League World Series. Colby and Corey Rasmus. I'm sure it's already been said, but not every kid is going to have the means, let alone a desire to compete that hard. It's not easy to get in. You mean willing your kid to greatness using the age-old technique of dads yelling doesn't translate to the major leagues? I'm honestly baffled. I'm surprised it's that many. Most of the best 12-year-old athletes just matured early and end up being fairly small at full growth. Only 64? That's a crazy high amount considering there's tens of thousands of youth baseball teams and only like 20 teams that make it. I know of one Little League champion who made his way to the NHL instead and is currently the GM of the NY Rangers. Chris Story. One of them made it to the National Hockey League. Former NY Rangers player and current general manager Chris Story. I went to school with a kid who played on the Phoenix City, Alabama team that went, and he's definitely not a pro athlete now. Another great Dougie story. For anyone who's ever watched a Little League World Series game on TV, this is not surprising. Well, they're at the integer limit, that's why. It was created quite a while ago. After all, that may seem like a high number, but those parents are pouring money into their kids' sports, still waiting for the guy that wins the Little League, college, and regular World Series. What proportion of US-raised Major League Baseball players played in Little League, but no MLB World Series player has gone on to the Little League World Series? Well, yeah, because they should be playing pony baseball, not Little League. You mean kids grow up and find other interests? Man, that's fucking wild. It's also a little over one of college football players make it to the NFL. Plus Chris Story, an eventual player in the majors of hockey, not baseball. Do you mean, played in the actual final games, or the whole tournament? I'm peeking right now. With declining baseball participation, it'll probably become easier. Man, we were always top 3 in the state but could never make it. Smiley face, crying face, crying face. My personal favorite was Carney Lansford. Goofy stance and all. They clearly didn't have that Kenny fucking Powers mentality. My question is, has anyone won the LLWS and MLB pennant?